he riseth from supper, and laid aside his garments, and took a towel, and girded himself. After that he poureth water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. May the Lord add a rich blessing to the reading of his word.
At the end of the service today, if there's anyone in the congregation who is in need of prayer or special prayer, would you meet us, the elder, at the front pew up here for prayer? Thank you.
Give us, Lord, give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us, Lord, forgive us of our debts, for thine is the kingdom, thine is the power, and the glory forever, forever. Amen. Lead us from temptation. Lead us from temptation. But deliver us. Deliver us. Evil to thy salvation. Thine is the kingdom, thine is the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Good morning. Thank you very much for everything that has happened up to this point. I really appreciated the men singing and everything that's been said. And Susan, I really appreciated that story because that's my favorite thing to pray with someone who is experiencing some big difficulty is I hope that you can stay under the wings of Jesus where it's safe, that he'll hold you under the wings. And that's such a safe place. It's such a beautiful picture to me of just being held up close to Jesus. I love that picture of the swans because that's very nice. Well, good morning. This morning, I want to tell you a story that happened to my husband and I. A lot of you didn't ever meet my husband. He died about 9 years ago. And I don't know whether it was because of his early childhood or because of his time in the service or if it was just a particular gift that God gave him. Because at the time this story happened, my husband wasn't even a Christian. But my husband had the most unusual sense of discernment that I have ever seen in any human being. He could look across a room as large as this one, see a person, and look inside their heart like nobody I have ever seen, without even saying a word, without the other person ever saying a word. He knew things about people that were just very uncanny. And he always used to caution my children, especially I think he saw this as a physical protection for them. You know, always be aware of your surroundings. Notice what's in your surroundings. Notice the people in your surroundings, the looks on their faces, their body language, all the nonverbal cues they're giving you as to who they are. And this was part of his arsenal that the way he understood who people were and could see them so clearly before he ever met them. And he always talked to my sons about all these kinds of things. And one night, we were in the truck. We live out 16 miles east of here in Stafford County, almost in King George. And there are two main roads that you can travel going towards Fredericksburg from our house. You could either ride White Oak Road, which we called 218 from the old days when we first moved here, and Route 3. Now on 218, it is not a very safe road to walk, but almost every time I'm on that road, I see people walking, at least one or two. Even at night, it's not unusual to see people walking. And this particular night, we were in his pickup truck with an extended cab, and it was chilly. It was cold. We both had coats on inside the truck. And we were driving along 218, and he spots a woman with a little baby walking along the side of the road. Well, that's what I saw, a woman with a little baby walking along the side of the road. My husband saw a woman who had left her house with no preparation on very short time because she had no coat on, no blanket on the baby. He saw an emergency. He saw somebody who was in trouble. And he immediately stopped the truck, rolled down the window and said, "Come get in the truck." And then he thought about what he was saying and he said, "My wife's in here. My wife's in here. Don't be scared." She got in the truck with the baby, and sure enough, her husband had become violent, and she had left the house on foot, trying to get to her father's house, which was over in Spotsylvania, about 15 miles from where she was at the time. And we were able, pray for me, Wanda, it's that time of year. And we were able to help her that night because my husband was ready, because he noticed what was around him and he had eyes open to see need. Thank you, Wanda. I'm fine now. That was critical. that he was prepared for that emergency. And as Christians, I believe God is calling us to be prepared to see need, to prepared to meet need. And that's something that I would like to talk to you about today. If you don't mind, we'll have a short prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you so very much for all the gifts you give us. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to partner with you in reaching out to people that don't know you and reaching out to people who have needs. For Jesus' sake, amen. The message that I have for you today is really quite a simple message, and I cannot explain to you why I have struggled so much with preparing this message. It has been an incredible struggle. I have sat for hours in front of blank paper. I've done hours and hours of research, and it's been really difficult to find the right way to bring this message, to even begin it. And I don't really know why, because every Christian already knows, and maybe that's why it's too simple, that God calls us to kindness, that it's a big priority of God for us to be kind to other people. I think we all know that. And sometimes, I don't know about the rest of you, but sometimes I fail in that quest to be kind to other people, to always find the ways to see what other people need. When I read my Bible, I see certain themes. Of course, the main theme that we see in the Bible, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, is the theme of salvation. God, that theme runs all the way through the Bible. But then there are some other themes that are in the Bible. And another theme that is there is the call from God for us to be His people and to be everything that He has designed us to be. Many people would like to put lots of expectations on Christians for behavior, attitude, all kinds of different things. But God has called us to do two main things that I can see. And this I think you can find all through the Bible. You will find these same things over and over again. He's called us to worship only Him. He wants to hold a place in our hearts that we would never give the honor that we give to Him to any other person or thing. He wants to be the person that we worship, and He calls us to that. He's not going to be satisfied with anything less. And I think that most Christians understand that in order to, two of the things that we need to do to worship God is to read our Bibles every day and to pray. And I encourage you, not very long ago, somebody just mentioned to me, I try to read my Bible, and they tell me to read my Bible, but I don't understand it. Well, find a Bible that you can understand. Even if you have to go to the Bible stories, we have 3 sets of Bible stories back in our library, and anybody is open to borrow any of them that they want. My mother read those to me every day when I was a child, and I can tell you that I started out in Christianity with a good idea of the Bible from reading those Bible stories. So don't be afraid to look and keep looking until you find a Bible that is right for you, that you can read and understand and enjoy reading. God wants to communicate with us through His Word, but He also wants us to communicate with Him every day. He wants to hear from us, and I find that so mind-boggling. I mean, there might be somebody in this congregation, I don't know all of you really well, who could drive up to the White House and be welcomed in and ushered into the Oval Office. If you are, you're keeping it a good secret, but I couldn't. Most of us couldn't. Same thing with Buckingham Palace. You pull up to Buckingham Palace and ask to see Queen Elizabeth, I'm thinking, no, that's not going to really happen. Maybe a mansion on Rodeo Drive, California. I don't think we're going to be ushered in. But God created all of these people. He is far greater than any of them. And He invites us, begs us to come and talk to Him. That is so mind-boggling to me. Every day I thank Him for that, because it's just so mind-boggling to me that He wants me to talk to Him. I think that's amazing. And He wants to change me. And when I sit and worship and consider all God has done for me and all I am to Him, Christianity is so sweet, very sweet. But God asked me something else of me. He asked me to put Him in the supreme place in my life, and then He asked me to treat everyone I meet as well as I want to be treated myself, and to love them and be kind to them. That's where the hard part of Christianity starts. I have no issues with God, but sometimes people get on my nerves. None of you, of course. But that is what God calls me to. Here, this theme, too, runs through the Bible from the start to the finish. We have lots of good examples. The way Abraham treated Lot, the way Joseph treated his brothers, but most of all, of course, the way Jesus treated people when He was on this earth. And Jesus' love for people was very practical, and it wasn't complicated. He met people where they were, and He loved them. And I think He's calling us to that too. I love a word. James Johnson uses a particular word quite often that has really made an impact on me, and that is the word intentional. Somebody's laughing. Bajor says he says it too much. I don't really think so. Intentional kindness means that we set about to be kind before the situation arises, before we meet the need, before we see the opportunity. We have it in our minds that we wake up in the morning and say, Lord, make me kind today. Help me to notice opportunities to be kind. Help me to have my eyes open to the needs around me. I'll tell you a story that happened to me right after my husband died that was pretty traumatic to me. It was only a few weeks after Denny died, and I was visiting my daughter, and I was with my daughter and her family. We were at a very, very large Adventist church, and my son-in-law was doing youth ministry at the time, and I'm sure that before we left the house, I was told that everybody was going to be participating in the youth service that was going on. There was going to be a big youth service at the same time that the sanctuary service was going on, and I'm sure they told me about it. And I'm also sure in the state of mind that I was in a couple of weeks after my husband's death, it went right over my head, and I never noticed that they even said it to me. Because after Sabbath school was over, I was sitting in the sanctuary, and it occurred to me finally that the church service had started, and my family was nowhere to be seen. So I got up and left the sanctuary and went looking for them. I figured some emergency had happened and they were nowhere to be seen. There were Beth and Jason, their kids, my son Sam, who was 14, and none of them were in there. Well, finally, after I wandered the halls a little bit, I went over to the area where the youth were meeting, and it was jam-packed, standing room only in there. And I realized if I went in, I realized they were there, I realized if I went in that some teenager would have to give up a seat for me because I was old. And I didn't really want that to happen, so I didn't go in there. But I was pretty distraught and not really able to handle long periods of time alone. And so I ducked into the kitchen. It was dark in there, and I thought I could sit in there by myself for a minute. I had to pull myself together, and there were a couple of women in there. Even though they hadn't had the lights on, they were working and talking to each other. So I went out of there, went into the bathroom. Now, a woman did talk to me in there. She told me there was a button open on the back of my dress and fixed it. That is the only person that talked to me that day. And so I went back to the sanctuary. By this time, the service is in full swing and the church is pretty full. I noticed in back of both of the doors to go in this church, there are men in suits standing in the back, and they look like deacons. Now, I'm not sure they were deacons, but I thought they were deacons. None of them made a move to find me a seat. I walked about halfway down the aisle and looked, and there were spaces in the middle, but nobody made a move to let me in. So I went back and went down the other aisle, and the same thing happened. Deacons, if they were deacons, never moved, never said a thing to me. Nobody moved to make room for me. The aisles were all taken, the front edge seats. I'm really upset. I go out and duck into another bathroom. Stay in there for a while, boo-hooing. Those of you who know me well, I do that well. And I couldn't even go out to the car because I hadn't driven. The car was locked. I had no keys to the car. And I decided I can't spend the church service in the bathroom. That's just not right. I'm going to try again. I went back in to the service. There were a couple of seats on the back wall. I sat in one of them and proceeded to cry as quietly as possible through the rest of the service. No one in that building said one word to me. They missed an opportunity. I really needed a hug. I really needed somebody that day. I don't want to miss opportunities like that, ever. And I don't want any of us to. I don't want anybody ever to have that experience in this church. Not that I think they would. This church is nothing like the church I was in. But there are people here today in this room who are much better than I at holding themselves together, and there's no visible sign on the outside that you're in pain, but you are. And you need somebody to care about it. And we need to be that for each other, and very, very importantly, outside these doors. How many cars do you think pass this building every week? I have no idea, but I know it's hundreds, maybe even 1,000. Who are those people? What do they need? What do they really need? How can we reach them? You know, there's a statistic. I have totally lost my notes, so I have no idea. There's a statistic that's been publicized recently. I think there was an article in USA Today that I read that the Adventist Church has the largest growth of any denomination in North America. Apparently they gauge our growth as 2.4%, and there are a lot of large denominations that are on the decline. They're actually losing more members than they're gaining, and so this is quite a big deal that the Adventist Church is making a 2.4 gain. Well, when I was doing research on churches and church growth and what makes churches grow, whatnot, I came across an article in a magazine called Adventist Today by a man by the name of Danny Bell, who is he's a pastor in Australia. And apparently this same type of statistic was going on in Australia. And this article basically said this statistic does not mean what it seems to mean because of immigrants we have from other countries coming in and all sorts of factors that he described. But I'm going to read you one paragraph from his his article, and it's a little negative, but I think there is some truth in it that we can find. The reality is that the church in Western society has become insular, self-centered, and unconcerned about a suffering, dying world. We prefer to stand at church doors and call out to the public rather than to go out and get involved in the dirty business of befriending the scum of the earth. It's kind of strong language. The fortress mentality is alive and well in our churches, and until we realize that it's not all about going home to heaven and wishing Jesus would come, the sooner we can properly engage in the Master's business. We need to be living in the moment right now. Right now we have opportunity to reach people. Well, I was very impressed with this article, and I really started doing a lot of investigation to find out what kind of churches are growing. What's making them grow? What are they doing that's special? And one of the things I found over and over again is that churches that are looking to meet the needs in the community are getting bigger. Some of these churches are doing programs like divorce and grief care. They're doing, I have a whole list of these, if I can find them in my notes. They're doing all sorts of programs to meet needs, and they're doing finance classes, computer classes, tutoring, mentoring, English classes for immigrants, all kinds of classes that meet needs in the community. A recommendation is that churches go to civic leaders and say, what does this community need? What are the biggest needs here? That's some of the churches are doing that. Other churches, one church Rick LeBate told us about in British Columbia, they have all sorts of programs. They have these wonderful fundraisers. I know there are some men in this church that would like to do this. They have golf tournaments, and they raise a lot of money with these golf tournaments, and they use that money not to fund their churches, but to buy vans for single mothers and help people who need help. Those seem like neat projects. But I also came across a book by a man by the name of Steve Sjogren. And he is a pastor of a large church in Cincinnati, and he has written a book that many of you might have already read. I may be a latecomer to it. It's called The Conspiracy of Kindness. And that is a fascinating book to me because his program is so easy and so powerful. His church, He tries to advocate that every person in the church give 2 hours a month. He said some people are so involved and interested they do it once a week. But his church spends time, and like I said, members are encouraged to a couple hours a week to go out and just show God's love in simple ways. On a hot day, they might go outside a baseball stadium and give away sodas. Or maybe they clean all the windshields on people's cars in a parking lot. But one of the most interesting things they do is they go into stores and restaurants and ask if they can clean the bathrooms. Now, this man is the pastor of a church that has thousands of people attending it. And he's a pretty well-known author. Every week he goes and cleans toilets. And when I was reading about this in this book, I started thinking about one of my favorite books, which is Mere Christianity, and the chapter on pride, and how C.S. Lewis cautions us against pride. And I thought, yeah, I bet if you go out and clean toilets once a week, it's pretty hard to have a lot of pride. Bet that's a good idea. He said that two of the main people, this doctor at this church and himself, they go out and do this at least once a week. And but most of the programs they do are just plain fun. just doing things for people, and this is what they say: just wanted to show you God's love. One time there was a traffic jam in front of their church. They really quickly iced down a lot of sodas and stood out and handed them as people were sitting out there, couldn't move. They do a lot of things that are simple, not very costly, and children can do them, and yet they work. And what's interesting to me, I thought, people try to give donations, they won't take donations. Because nowadays, I don't know how much mail or how many phone calls you're getting at your house for free items, but they never turn out to be free. Always there's a catch. We will give you this free if you buy this. We will send you this free if you pay a $299 shipping charge. We will do all these free things for you if you do this for us first. But these people go out and they give out services, they give out things, and they say, just wanted to let you know that God loved you today. And over and again in this book, there are stories about people. Some of the people are very wealthy, some of them are poor, but they always are moved by the sheer fact that someone for no reason just hands them a gift and says, just wanted you to know God loves you. Sometimes, it didn't sound, from the way he presented it in the book, once in a great while, they will have a card attached to the gift that says, from the members of such and such church. But he said generally they do not do that. And even though they have done almost no advertising, and there's nothing connected with these things that they're doing, their church has grown phenomenally. Just the fact that they are doing these things to show God's love, God is sending people to their church. I think in these days when we spend enormous amounts of money and enormous amounts of energy to put on evangelistic series, and I'm not saying that those aren't great and that at some point we need to talk about what we believe and what God is telling us and whatever, but as introductory events, we're spending so much money on evangelistic series sometimes, and if one person comes and stays here for 6 months, we are really excited. But these people are having amazing results from just doing very simple things that children can do. And there were several stories about times when, one particular one I'm thinking about is that they went down a neighborhood and looked for grass that was tall. And when they found grass that was tall, they went and knocked on the door and said, we'd like to cut your grass. Yeah, how much do you want? The man was sitting in his recliner watching a ball game, and he said, how much do you want? No, it's free. We do not want any money. He said, all right. So they cut his grass, and before they left to cutting his grass, a little boy that was with him said, that man is in trouble. I really think we need to go and talk to that man. He's really in trouble. And so they went back and asked the man if there was anything else he needed, anything that they could do for him. And he started to tell a story of his wife being sick, him having lost his job, all kinds of things that were happening to him. And since the little boy had been the one that had sensed this, they had the little boy pray for him. And this man had been very, very hardened attitude through the whole thing. But when the little boy started praying for him, he started crying. I really believe there's some power in kindness, in intentional kindness, focused on people that cannot give us anything in return, when we're not seeking anything in return. And I really believe that if we wake up in the morning and ask God to give us that spirit of kindness, that spirit of helpfulness, and ask Him to open our eyes, that we'll be able to see it, just like my husband was able to see that woman on the street that night. You know, in the story of the Good Samaritan, that Good Samaritan was going somewhere. He was going somewhere. He had a plan for his day. But his plan was interrupted. And he made time for his plan to be interrupted. Who knows? Maybe he missed a big business deal that day. We don't know. We don't know what his plans were. We don't know what the plans of the priest and the Levite were. We know they were respected leaders in their community, and they had important jobs. And maybe they felt that, I've heard it mentioned in several sermons, that about the rites of purification, if they touched a dead body, there would be great limitations. They couldn't go into the temple, and they didn't know that man wasn't going to die while they were trying to help him. They had things to do, important places to go. We kind of look at them as they were kind of hardened people who didn't care, but we don't know that. They might have just been regular people who did have some compassion in their hearts, but felt like the place that they were going, the thing that they had to do, was more important than stopping to help this man who was laying on the road bleeding. The Good Samaritan didn't think it was more important to go where he was going. He stopped. And because he did, don't you think he will be surprised and shocked when he gets to heaven and finds out that he has become famous in the Bible, that innumerable sermons have been preached on his story? I think he'll be pretty surprised to find that out. But I'm pretty sure he's going to be there to find it out. There was a college professor, I'm pretty sure he was a theology professor, that posted a very important exam one day. And as the students were going to the exam, there was a person, I don't know if they were right outside the building or in the hallway or wherever, but they were on the route that the students would have to take, and the person was visibly emotional, sobbing, upset. Every student had to pass by that person to get to the classroom. Some of the students were concerned, but most of the students did not stop, because they knew if they missed that exam, they could fail the class and possibly have to take the class over and not get to where they were going, to become ministers, to become teachers, whatever they needed the class for. A few people did stop, risked missing in the exam, and stopped to talk to the person who was so upset. Turns out the person was the exam. We have a vision, and if you open your bulletins for just a second with me, right, the back page is our service today, and right over here it says our mission and vision. And I'd like you to look under vision where it says outreach. And this is what it says. Significantly, this is our vision, to significantly increase the number of people in the community touched by programs designed to meet physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. We have a vision to do that. And today, I want to challenge you. Let's become the vision. Let's get out there and do it. Because I believe God's calling us to this. I honestly believe that God is calling us to be people who meet needs, people who look for needs and meet them. Thank you.